John Nichols from The Nation. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be with you. Can you hear me well?
I can. Where are you? Are you somewhere public?
I'm a little bit public. Yeah. I've been running around, so I'm in a very socially distanced but credible spot.
Well, thank you so much for making the time for us. I really appreciate that. We've got
I'm glad to be with you.
Erratic president, unstable, altogether unfit for the highest position in the land. I think at least you and I can agree to that, possibly all of our viewers. Lucky for us, the Constitution has laid out specific ways to remove a president exhibiting this kind of behavior. Well, is Congress going to do anything here? John Nichols, thanks for joining me again. If you've just come out from under a rabbit hole, you you might need me to introduce John Nichols, writer about politics for The Nation as its national affairs correspondent. He also has a new book out, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party: The Enduring Legacy of Henry Wallace's Anti-Fascist, Anti-Racist Politics. I'm very glad that this legacy is enduring of anti-fascist, anti-racist politics. We need that. John, what do we do? What do we need to know about the 25th Amendment? What was it made for, and where does it stand today?
Well, that's a good place to begin, because the 25th Amendment has deep roots. It actually traces back arguably to the end of Franklin Roosevelt's presidency. And Franklin Roosevelt passed away in April of 1945, and Harry Truman became president essentially for a full term. And people thought that was a troublesome notion, but didn't really act at the time. Again, in the 50s, Dwight Eisenhower had a heart attack at the start of his, or actually during his first term, was reelected, served much of his second term with serious health problems. And then in 1963, John Kennedy was assassinated. Each of those incidents led to a real debate in Congress about how they set up a better succession process. I only tell you that up front to say that the roots of the 25th Amendment are sort of in classic succession, i.e. the idea of, if the vice presidency goes open, how do you fill the position? If you have challenges related to maintaining the presidency, what do you do? So that opened up a big debate in Congress in the late 60s, and in 1967, the 25th Amendment was enacted. Most of what people talk about with the 25th Amendment is, if a president dies, then the vice president steps up, and you end up in a situation with continuity because a new vice president can be picked. But within the 25th Amendment, there is also a section that deals with, if a president is incapacitated, that can either be because of a physical incapacity, he may be having surgery, maybe hospitalized, and the 25th Amendment has been invoked quite a few times in recent history for a short period.
I understand Dick Cheney was the president for 5 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's a good thing they didn't tell us that at the time. I think there would have been pandemonium in the streets, at least.
It's an unsettling. I as an author of a biography of Dick Cheney, I can tell you it's an exceptionally unsettling thought, except for the fact that he was essentially vice president before and after that, or president before and after that as well, because he ran the show. So that's exactly right, though, that in a moment of physical incapacity. But then there's also a final reality within it. It does set up the prospect that if a president of the United States is mentally incapacitated or is suffering from some sort of breakdown or challenge, that you might also choose to remove that president and because of necessity. And in that, it's a complex process in the amendment, but essentially the cabinet would vote to move the president out of position and move the vice president in. And if the president and vice president were incapacitated, you'd have, then you'd go into the standard line of succession. Buried within that was a permission for the Congress to set up a commission that could examine the capabilities of a sitting president. And that's what really brings us to the discussion today.
Yes. Well, I wish we had started this earlier, because there was a lot of talk about Donald Trump's mental incapacity, for months, for perhaps even years, and before he was even elected. But the 25th Amendment is coming up right now at this time in a more serious way, right before an election. Are we correct to infer that it's because Donald Trump has coronavirus? The medications he's been reportedly put on have been known to cause erratic behavior. Is that why this is coming up right now?
Well, that's a very good question. The Jamie Raskin, who is a congressman from Maryland and a former constitutional law professor with a tremendous experience in this area, has argued for a long time that the amendment needed to be clarified, that you needed to have a better sense of how that congressional oversight of capacity would work and how you'd set up a commission to deal with it. So this is not a new issue, but it has been pushed to the forefront because the President of the United States has been diagnosed with a very serious ailment that, in fact, has killed more than 210,000 Americans, and that has also infected, millions and millions of Americans. It's a big deal. And so right there, you bring up issues of capacity, physical capacity. Then, as you note, there's also been concerns about medications and, frankly, the president's erratic behavior truthfully, I think erratic behavior
it's roid
go
rage.
Back a long way, but they've been heightened in the moment. And so last week you saw Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congressman Raskin raise the issue of clarifying the amendment with the establishment of a congressional commission. This is done in the context of what's happened, in recent weeks as regards Donald Trump. But it's important to understand that this is not going to affect Donald Trump's presidency, largely because you have to get some Senate buy-in as well. And so what we're really talking about is beginning a process by which we can avoid situations like this in the future. And it's frankly using the moment in our history as leverage to address an issue that should have been addressed a long time ago.
John, how insane, what kind of situation do you think we'd have to be in with President Trump in order for the, Congress to get together and act together in a bipartisan and bicameral manner?
Well, it's quite obvious that there's no situation with Donald Trump that would be sufficient for the Republican Senate to do the right thing. And
even if there were an outside threat, a threat of war or attack or something, where we would actually need maybe an executive branch to function.
I think you could probably speculate out to some extreme circumstance where you might get Senate buy-in for doing the right thing. But remember, we're talking about the 25th Amendment here, and within the context of the 25th Amendment, what we're talking about with Congressman Raskin is setting up a commission of experts who would examine a president's capacity and, might well determine that a president has crossed certain lines that would argue for removal of that vice president, removal of the president, bringing the vice president into position. The thing to understand, though, is that Congress also has another capacity in its own right to deal with this issue, and that's impeachment. The House could impeach Donald Trump today and say, he has taken actions, he has done things that are dangerous, that are troublesome to the country, that are in fact threatening, and the Senate could try and remove tomorrow. That's the thing that people don't understand about the impeachment process is it gives you the ability to remove a president in rapid order if the need is there. The Congress failed to do that in January or February of this year. The House did its job. The Senate refused to do so. And so I think we have to operate in talking about the 25th Amendment in that perspective, to understand that the Senate has sent very clear signals that they do not choose, the Republican majority in the Senate does not choose to hold this president to account.
So it seems that this would be, we're 2.5 weeks out from an election. Everybody's busy trying to confirm a religious zealot to the Supreme Court. People have their priorities. It just doesn't seem almost, politically feasible to do this either right now before the election, or should the unthinkable happen and he becomes elected again, anytime between now and January, because of the look of it, right? It would look like the Democrats are playing politics, etc. I don't know. And in that vein, why is getting rid of Trump so bad? They're going to get evangelical Trump as the second in command. We all saw him at the debate. He seems more horrendous than I really could have imagined. I have not spent much time studying Mike Pence. What is keeping the Senate from breaking their lockstep when it's not like, Chairman Mao would be the next in line to take over?
Well, I think it's the fly on Pence's head. The reality is that Donald Trump is a punishing political leader. He has made it very clear from the start of his presidency that if you cross him, if you disagree with him, he will immediately strike back. He'll do so on Twitter. Of course, we see that all the time. And that's important because he has a huge
50
following.
tweets before 8 a.m. today.
On almost any day. And of late. But then also, remember, he fires people. He endorses in primaries. He is a politically punishing figure. And what he has proven is that you can bring the majority in the Senate to heel. You can literally cause them not to do their job out of fear that they will be punished by the leader of their party. And so that's the critical thing to understand here, because this is where it all intersects, right? The impeachment power, as outlined in the Constitution, should have worked. It should have worked to remove Donald Trump in February. It didn't, because Donald Trump has successfully caused the majority of U.S. senators to not be willing to do the job they swore an oath to do. That's why people turn to the 25th Amendment and begin to look at it as potentially an avenue by which you might, in a critical moment, cause action. I think we have to be realistic about it. And I think Jamie Raskin and even Speaker Pelosi, in this case, are realistic about it. They understand that they're not speaking about necessarily removing Trump at this point, despite the fact that Trump has gone crazy just at the mention of the 25th Amendment. I think what they're really saying is the moment we are in illustrates the need to get some things in order. And that's really the truth of Donald Trump's presidency from its beginning.
I can't imagine a worse one. I mean, could there be a worse one?
Oh, yeah, there could. Look, this is the thing to understand, and it's a very important thing to understand about the Republican Party in the latter part of the 20th century, the start of the 21st. The Republican Party knows that the positions that it advocates for are unpopular, incredibly unpopular. Polling tells them that. Election results in fair and clean elections tells them that. And so what they have to do is find a salesman. And so since 1980, when they nominated Ronald Reagan, 2000, when they nominated George W. Bush, selling this notion called compassionate conservatism, and then in 2016 with Trump, they keep looking for. The fact that
you even have to name it compassionate conservatism, it's like gentle whipping. I don't think so.
So
okay, sorry.
That's it. That's it. This party's always looking for a salesman to peddle a very unpopular product, and so it's easy to look at Trump and say, well, he's the worst you could possibly end up with. But the fact is, that's ridiculous. That's an absurd notion. Of course, they could find worse, and they would if there was somebody they thought could help them win elections. That's why they've been so incredibly loyal to Trump, because he has helped them to secure the presidency, and in 2016, at least, to be relatively successful at the ballot box. Now, obviously, in 2018, he was a very damaging and destructive figure, harmed his own party. I think this year he's going to harm it again, but they're afraid of him, and so they won't deal him out of the game. But if Trump is defeated, I promise you, without a question, without any debate, that they will find the next salesperson, and that person could well be a darker and more dangerous figure. So addressing the 25th Amendment now is a good idea. But
perhaps someone who presents themselves as less crazy. That was the problem with Pence in the debate. He seemed although, to the naked eye, he seemed to be horrendous, but he was a calm, measured horrendous. And I think that goes far with religious folk.
Well, and Juliana, imagine if you took Donald Trump, most of his positions, and had a younger, very savvy woman presenting it, right? Imagine if you had a younger, very savvy man, maybe a veteran or someone, propose. You can start to package this up in different ways, the same positions, but in with a candidate, with even a president who runs the same sort of line, which I would argue often tends toward an extreme authoritarianism, toward a disregard for the Constitution, toward a blaming of and just diminishing of vast communities in America, whole groups of people, of racial and ethnic division. The president practices all of this, but does so in a very in a more measured way that doesn't say extreme or deeply unsettling things personally. It's just the policies that are bad. Now, then you'd have a real test for this country. Trump is so erratic, so unsettling that he causes even people who might agree with him on a lot of what he says to break with him.
Which is why the Democrats can run a non-progressive, corporatist kind of milquetoast, middle of the road candidate and possibly win in what we hope to be a landslide.
That's right. And so that's the way to understand it, is that, we ought to get a lot of things in order no matter what. And it should be bipartisan, nonpartisan. We should understand that issues of presidential capacity, presidential succession are important because the presidency is so incredibly powerful.
John, do you see that the Democrats, if they win, let's say we get all three, let's dream a big dream here. We get the Senate, we get the House, we get the presidency. Do you see that the Democrats, even though they are, so many of them, not all, are beholden to corporate power, which plays a role here? Do you see that they're going to perhaps try to do things to ensure the vote, do the gerrymandering, get campaigns financed publicly, the kind of things that would give a structural boost to actual democracy and therefore, the Democrats and the progressive Democrats?
They absolutely must. Look, this is the critical reality. First off, it's the election. That matters because if Joe Biden wins presidency, but Republicans control the Senate, Biden will essentially take president as a lame duck. He will have the power of the presidency, but not the ability to truly govern. He'll have to negotiate with Mitch McConnell on every issue. And we understand where that ends up. He'll have to fight even to get his own cabinet picks put in because you'll have this barrier, this challenge to overcome. So the election itself becomes critical in that regard. Then beyond that, you have to do structural reforms right up front. It doesn't mean that you neglect the physical pain and suffering of the United States at this point. Of course, you have to address the COVID crisis and mass unemployment, something that this Senate and this president have not done. So you have that there. But parallel to that, you have to take structural steps that you are able to do when you have the power. So if Democrats take control of the Senate, the first thing they should do is reorganize the Senate in a way that it can actually function. That's get rid of the filibuster, at least in most cases, and also set up a set of rules that make it possible to govern. That's step one. Step two, then you look at structural changes that assure against crisis situations like much of what we've seen. And one of those steps does involve clarifying the 25th Amendment, as Jamie Raskin has suggested. You also have to assure that democracy functions in a whole bunch of other ways. So yes, there have to be a whole host of steps taken to protect voting rights, to make sure that future elections are freer, fairer, more functional. And there's a lot of legislation in that regard. You have to fund elections and just get the resources out there. And then a final thing that you have to do is make sure that working class people in this country have some way to express their voice beyond the ballot box. And that means you have to do things like card check and make it easier so that you can organize unions, collectively bargain, take those steps. Those are baseline structural things you do up front. If you do them, you you sustain democracy and democratic political activity no matter what happens in the latter months of a democratic presidency. And that was a failure of many previous democratic presidents. They didn't address at least some of the structural stuff up front, and they ended up in a situation where in the first midterm election, they lost a lot of governing authority, and they never got around to those things. And so there are steps that should be taken right away to use the power that you have to make sure you don't end up in a situation like, frankly, where we've been for the last 4 years.
John Nichols, writer for about politics for The Nation as the national affairs correspondent, author of many books, including the latest, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, The Enduring Legacy of Henry Wallace's Anti-Fascist, Anti-Racist Politics. We did a nice interview with you about that. So if you're watching on YouTube, go check it out. It is on ACT.tv's YouTube channel. Follow John at Nichols Uprising, Nichols Uprising. John, I feel like your bio should include a lot more stuff because you have done and continue to do a lot more stuff. But I do thank you so much for being part of our program and being a regular guest here. And I think the next time you are scheduled to come on is after November 3rd. So I guess we'll next time we meet, there will be excitement afoot, shall we say?
Let's hope that we have an election result and are not in the midst of a crisis there. But let's also hope that that we can actually start to talk about addressing some of these issues that have gone unaddressed for way too long, as regards economic and social and racial justice, protecting the planet, ending the overwhelming influence of the military-industrial complex, and maybe getting to real democracy in America.
Thank you so much. They're calling me. Can you hear the phone? Thank you so much for joining us, John. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
It's an honor. Thanks.
You're watching ACT TV. I'm Julianna Forlano. I don't know who that is calling me on the phone right over there. But if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook and watching on Twitch, check us out. We're here all at 10 a.m. pretty much Eastern time, almost every single day. And when we're not here, Solidarity Now is on the air on Fridays. So thanks for watching. Sorry about that. Optimum makes me have like a phone, like a landline phone that doesn't ever stop. I can't stop it from ringing. It's a real frustration as a at-home news person. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Tomorrow, Seth Shostak is coming on. That's right, the Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute. We're going to be talking to him about how Harry Reid continues to I know this is a little off topic, but Harry Reid just recently and continually talks about extraterrestrials. And we're going to talk to Seth Shostak about what he knows about that. It should be interesting, to say the least. And then on Thursday, Greg Palast is joining us. Thanks again for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.